So, they announced the Booker long list last week. And my good friend Charlie, formerly of Charlie Brooke, got in touch, and she asked whether I'd reserved any from the library, and we all know how that went. Please go and watch that library haul. And you saw that I got China Room by Sanjeev Sahota. Well, when I got home, and I actually properly went and I read about what all the different books were about, I tried Clara and the Sun and I DNF'd that. And I tried that one by Patricia Lockwood and decided that I'd read it at a later date. I read the blurb for like Perpetual by Francis Spufford. And I misread it. Okay. So I only saw this thing about a post-war tale, and since I've been enjoying the novels I've been reading from the post-war period recently, I thought, great, this is a book for me. Unfortunately, what I didn't read was this bit where this German rocket strikes a London Woolworths, and all these people are killed. And that this novel here, similar to Life After Life by Kate Atkinson, decides that it's going to go in and decide the bomb never hit London. These people got to live. And then it's going to go through their lives over the next 75 years. Well, that prologue, that whole setup for this novel was completely unnecessary. Because the fact that the rocket never hits London does not affect the way their lives go. It does not cause any sort of change to London. So all we end up presented with is the lives of people over 6 decades questioning what was the point of including that bit about the bomb at the start when the bomb doesn't actually affect the lives of these characters anymore. And perhaps that's the point. You're saying to me that you can give voice to these characters who died and let them have these fictional lives, but that's the point. That's my point, mate. It's fiction. And you know what we often do in fiction? We create lives for people that didn't exist. Therefore, the fact that these people died in actuality is a tragedy, but these people here, Joe, Valerie, Alec, Ben, Vernon, they didn't exist. And so this fictionalised account of what could have happened is just what fiction is in the first place. And unfortunately, it's not very good. It's a very masculine idea of what the world has been like over the last 70 years. Throughout the 50s and the 60s, I knew that air text was going to get mentioned because all it does is it goes on this nostalgia trip. And that's all it is a nostalgia trip through the decades, showing us the high points and the low points of those decades. So, yeah. It's a condensed history lesson in the form of fiction, in the form of doing something heroic by giving voices and lives to the people who unfortunately were killed during the Second World War. And had that had any sort of root, had we seen anything about the way the war affected their lives, then maybe I would have felt differently to this, because the war, the Second World War in particular, is so prevalent in the way people talk and from that era. And these children lived their formative lives through this. These children lived their formative years through the Second World War. So there is going to be some mention of it somewhere within their lives. But with here, we have nothing. From the point when it says T+5 1949, we don't get to see anything more about the war. We don't hear about it. We don't hear about the consequences, the way that it might have caused these people to live their lives. And I'm not saying that I wanted some sort of in-depth analysis as to the war and how it's affected them. Maybe just some mention that it happened within their lifetime. And because I'm friends with people who were born during the war or towards the latter end of it, and they still talk about it nowadays. And they talk about the impacts it had on their childhood. And they talk about the way the governments over the years and the way the world has gone over the years has affected them. Here, with each subsequent chapter where we move from 1 year to maybe 5 years down the line, 7 years, 20 years, they never discuss what came before. It's as though it never happened at all. History doesn't have a part to play. And it was lacking so much. How this has come to be longlisted for the Booker Prize over so many others astounds me. And quite honestly, it leaves me recognising why I haven't paid attention to the Booker so much in the last 5 years. Because this is a good piece of popular fiction, but it reads like vignettes. It reads like there's no cohesion between it. It's fiction, and as I say, it's a good nostalgia trip for anyone who reads it, who's been around over these last 7 decades, 6 decades, what have you. But other than that, the whole crux of the novel, the thing that it hangs on, is this idea that the author is reinventing the lives of these people who unfortunately died. And if you remove that, because it never comes up again within the novel, you just have this novel about 6 or 7 people living between 1944 and 2009. And it was a bit like reading a Wikipedia synopsis of everything that's happened on EastEnders. All the things that could have affected them. All the certain tragedies that could have happened. I don't particularly understand why it exists in the way it does, why it's marketed the way it is, because it's just fiction. That's it. It's not doing anything new or anything different or anything phenomenal. There's no plot to speak of, no driving force. The characters aren't fully formed. The characters are just archetypes that we've seen perpetuated over the years. The discussion of mental health is abysmal. Something that goes on with a teenage girl towards the end just feels like it was shoehorned in there for some sort of drama, and it was completely unnecessary. Indeed, this entire novel, I would say, was unnecessary. Lord, what a waste. Because I think there's not really a good idea there when you think about it. I could go to a cemetery now and I could see a grave and decide that I was going to create a life for that person down there. And that's just what writers do with fiction. And so applauding this as though it's done something new and inventive is silly, because it's just what fiction is. I am just gobsmacked. Befuddled, really. If you've read this book and would like to discuss it, then please feel free to let me know your thoughts in the comments. Open up some kind of discussion. I hope that you enjoyed this video, because until next time, that is all.